Welcome to Alasquatch, the show all about Bigfoot in the great state of Alaska. I'm your host, Beans Baxter. So lace up your boots, zip up your coat, and come with me on an adventure as we explore all things cryptid in the last frontier. All right, guys, welcome to the second installment of my critique and review and impressions, I guess, on True Detective Season 4. Again, I'm doing this because I worked in law enforcement in Alaska for the past 15 years. I was in the military up here for another 4 years, so I've got about 20 years experience in Alaska between law enforcement and the military. I was actually the investigation sergeant for my department when I retired, so I was actually a Alaskan detective. So I've investigated everything from uh, misdemeanor assault crimes to homicides. So every level of crime you can imagine, I have had a hand in investigating here in the last frontier. This episode is going to cover episodes 2 and 3. I'd originally planned to just do the first episode and then just do a series wrap up at the end. And I found myself with a little bit of time, and I thought, I'm just going to do episodes 2 and 3 together here. And I had was going over my notes, and I was kind of having a hard time remembering some stuff. So I was like, I better get these down now before I forget. I'm getting ready to head off on a trip here pretty soon. As you can see, if you're watching the video portion of this, I have shorn my winter locks. I usually don't cut my hair from about October to May. And I went and got a haircut yesterday because I'm getting ready to go someplace warm, and I don't want a bunch of hair on my head. My head feels like it's about 2 pounds lighter with all my hair gone. And so I'm getting ready to head south. It's February in Alaska. That's about the time people start taking vacations and going someplace warm to get out of the middle of winter as it is. February is usually pretty cold. And then March, depending on the year, we usually get hammered with snow, which we've had a big snow load this year. A lot of snow this year. We just got like 5 or 6 inches the other day. And we just got dug out from that, which it was 5 or 6 inches really isn't that big of a deal. The problem is the wind was blowing, and it makes it hard to see. Visibility gets low. A little concerned about my drive to the airport here in a few days. Initially, they're like, "Oh, it's going to be cold and clear," and now the weather's kind of changed where there might be some snow, which I don't. I've been up here long enough. Driving the snow doesn't bother me, but there's always that like, well, is it going to be windy? Is it going to be white out? Is it, are the roads going to be maintained? Are they going to be plowed? So there's always some concerns when you've got to be at a certain place at a certain time, like the airport, and there's some weather coming in, which is a factor in the show. So I'm just, like I said before, if you watch the first episode, I'm not going to get super detailed into the structure of the show. I'm just going to kind of hit on some beats that struck a chord with me or that I wanted to comment on. I don't want to go like beat by beat through the show. Episode 2 starts. They found these missing scientists from the research station, and they're frozen in ice, which looks like, because when you can see them, they're only like from the head up. They're like sticking up out of the ground, which to me makes me think like, okay, well, are they on a lake or like what? Why is this? What is this frozen area here they're on? I don't think they ever say. And again, they never. It's kind of weird because it makes me see the way they're in there. It makes it seem like it wasn't frozen when they went in, and then they got frozen in there because they're like underground. They're like under the ice. So they never really get into that. Like what did that thaw out and they fell through and then it refroze? Like what was the deal there? That kind of confuses me a little bit. Um, I kind of feel like they just did that for aesthetics, like just for the look of it, kind of the feel of it. Um, there were a couple things in this episode. Uh, Navarro, the state trooper's talking to the woman that found them off to the side a little bit, and they're outside. They're in this like Arctic environment. They're above the Arctic Circle, according to the location the show has given us, and they're talking, and you can't see their breath. That kind of it made me think they were on a soundstage. Maybe I do know they filmed on location like Greenland or something. Mainly probably because the Alaska film doesn't do the filming commission has done away with our like tax credits or whatever that we were given there for a while. So that kind of took me out of it. Like, why can't you see their breath when they talk? Um, that was a little weird because some it seemed like in some scenes you could, and then in that scene you couldn't. They chip the missing scientists. They like chip the ice around them and like get them out like a big sculpture. I'm curious as to how they like chip the ice underneath them out, like pull them out like a freaking um, ice cube, a scientist sickle, and they're in this weird like they're in these weird poses where they're all like gestating and like their hands are up and um, I think it's Pryor, the rookie, says something about like man, it looks like they were running from something. They were really scared, and Danvers, the chief of the police, says something like, "Oh, there's no Yeti," which I thought I was like, "Yep, that's about what I would expect her to say." It was pretty funny. Just given, if you're not familiar with my show here, this is a show about all things cryptid and the great state of Alaska, including and up to we talked about Bigfoot quite a bit, and there's a lot of I don't want to say evidence, but there's a lot of precedent, I guess, for Bigfoot being in Alaska. And one, she called it Yeti, which is I don't think hardly anybody up here calls it that. And two, if you live in and around a native community, you've if you talk to enough natives, you heard enough stories that couldn't see somebody really just outright dismissing that's been in a position for that long. But it was kind of a funny little story, and it was very so the vibe was very Dyatlov Pass like. I don't know if it's because of the snow and the ice, uh, but very very same vibes. If you're not familiar with the Dyatlov Pass incident, there's a group of Russian college students in their early to mid 20s, I guess. I can't remember how many, about the same number, maybe six or seven, and they went up to this area called Dyatlov Pass. They were trying to get some kind of uh, it was some kind of class credit, like almost like a outdoor badge or credit a class or something. They had to go and spend the night in a certain temperature of weather or something, and go a certain distance. And they disappeared, and they were found in some very strange circumstances. It looked like the tent had been cut open from the inside. They were found. The bodies of the students were found away from the tent. Some, like a couple over here, a couple over there, like one over here, and very strange conditions for the bodies. And there's been a lot of speculation over the years as to what happened. Of course, nobody lived to tell the tale. So a lot of spooky speculation. Were they being chased by some kind of Yeti? Was it? I think the latest theory was there was some sort of avalanche or a wind storm. A wind. They called it something like a wind tunnel or typhoon that came down the hill. Just a lot of different speculation over the years as to what happened to them. Um, if I remember correctly, there was maybe some talk of some of the bodies, maybe radiating, having some radiation to the, or maybe been irradiated. So there was some talk of like some weapons testing that maybe they stumbled onto. A lot of stuff, very mysterious, much like our missing scientists here in True Detective. And they put them in the ice rink, the local hockey rink, basically because they don't have any place big enough to put them in cold storage, and they want them to thaw out. And it's kind of funny because in a lot of ways, I mean that's super rural Alaska. Like sometimes you don't have the resources, and you just kind of got to make it do with what you need. And at one point, somebody from it's a, I'm a little confused here. I'm not sure if this if so. At one point, they call themselves, is it AFP or something like that? I think I think what they're supposed to be a part of is like the borough police, like North Slope Borough Police. Although they don't use that name, I think that's what the AFP is supposed to be. And there's a captain that is over Danvers, and I wasn't sure if he was a trooper captain or if he's supposed to be an AFP captain, but I I didn't quite get their dynamic. Although he did seem to be in charge of her, um, and he wants to for Anchorage to take over the case, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me because I don't know if he means like Anchorage PD because they would never do that because that's way the hell outside their jurisdiction, or if he means maybe the Alaska. What is it? Alaska Bureau of ABI, like the Alaska Bureau of Investigation, which is troopers, and that, I guess that would be something maybe that they would take on. Although most of the time, in the TV shows you'll see jurisdictions like fighting over like a case, like this is our case. You stay away. Like we want to work, and in real life, it's often quite the opposite, where they're like, "This is your case. Oh no, no, this is yours. No, I don't think so." Like nobody wants to work it, especially if it's a boondoggle like this thing. So it was kind of cool. Danvers pulls out this book, this handbook, and it's it's supposed to be like the crime lab uh, guidebook, handbook on how to process evidence. And she's trying to convince this captain guy to let the body stay there so they can thaw out at the ice rink. And she pulls the forensic guide out, and it was pretty cool because I recognized the logo for the Anchorage Crime Lab. Like I had a book very similar to that. The one she had was much thicker than the one that we had. The one we had was probably, I don't know, maybe 100 pages at the most. Like it wasn't super thick. And the one she had was like the size of a phone book. And I think they was probably, it was probably something they put together for the show. But a lot of attention to details with a lot of this stuff. But on the other hand, there's like a lot of, so the props people, I guess is what I'm trying to say. The props people did their due diligence. There's a lot of good detail with some of the props, like that crime lab logo on the book she had. Uh, the plates on the trooper vehicles are very similar. They have AST at the beginning of them. There's a lot of little details that I notice here and there where I'm like, man, that's spot on. But then there's a few things that I'll talk about here a little bit later where I'm like, that is not at all accurate, or like that seems like they had no input whatsoever. One example is in the last episode, I was talking about how they were calling Trooper Navarro, they called her agent a couple times. And then in one of I think it was episode 3, several of the officers get called agents. And that's just not, it's just not the parlance that's used up here, unless you're some type of federal agent, or maybe you're attached to some task force and you're a task agent for the task force. That's not really a term that gets thrown around a lot up here. You're either officer, a trooper, or you get addressed by your rank like sergeant or corporal or whatever you are. But yeah, I thought that was a neat touch, having the Alaska Crime Lab logo on the front of the little book there. And she says she finds what she's looking for, and she reads to the captain. She says, frozen bodies are to be maintained at a temperature of 38 degrees until they are adequately thawed for transport or something like that. And it makes it sound like it's very, very like strict and by the book on how this stuff is done. And it's kind of funny because having worked in rural Alaska, like sometimes you, like I said, you just do the best you can with what you have. And remember when I said like her crime lab book that she had was like the size of a phone book, and the one we had was probably about not even a third of that. It's like that for like a lot of that stuff is vague for a reason, because you don't have, and especially in rural Alaska, you don't have the resources to do a lot of that stuff and to do it 100% by the book properly. And if a case goes to trial, I mean, can you imagine you live in the middle of nowhere in Alaska, and you have a body in a case that goes to trial, and you're sitting on the stand, like a year later or 2 years later, and the defense like whips out that book and is like, Sergeant Baxter, was the body properly maintained at 38 degrees for at least 42 hours while it was thawing from being frozen? Like, that's that's not a question you want to have to answer. That's not something you really have to want to like, let me check my logs, my temperature logs for the ice rink or whatever, where we stored the bodies. Like, they keep that stuff a little vague for a reason. Like, there's certain ways that they want you to handle certain types of evidence. But again, during certain circumstances, especially with bodies and body retrieval, you just kind of do the best you can with what you got, because bodies come in a lot of different shapes and sizes and substances. So we'll get into that a little bit later, but I thought that was kind of funny. That was 100% done for the show, just a reason for them to keep the bodies there a little bit longer, I think. Although they do mention she tries to get a forensic tech flown in, and the weather is an issue. They can't land. They're going to try again tomorrow. Had similar situations like that when I worked on St. Paul Island. Somebody's coming. Somebody's coming in to help you out or relieve you or to bring you something, and they can't because the weather's bad. The plane had to turn around. They'll try again tomorrow. That happens a lot, especially in Western Alaska, up in the interior. A lot of bad weather, wind, a lot of snow. There is a couple of instances in this episode and episode 3 where they're talking on both Navarro and Danvers are talking on the radio, and their radio etiquette is horrible. It's just not the way you talk on the radio. Very unrealistic. Although in more rural locations, it is a little bit more relaxed, I think, probably how you speak on the radio. But I think at one point, Navarro's like, over, like, what's your vector? It was ridiculous. Like, nobody says that. Nobody says like over. It just, yeah, I'm coming up over the landing site now. Over what? Over, it just goes back and forth. So Navarro finds out that one of the scientists had purchased a travel trailer or like a little camper, and her and Danvers find the trailer, and they go inside, and it's just like your typical crazy person. Like, there's pictures all over the wall and the ceiling and drawings, and of course we see the spirals pattern that we see on the tattoos and from the first season, and all kinds of stuff like that. And it looks like a body, but I don't think it was actually a body. I think it was just a what do you call it? It was just like an effigy, like wrapped in sheets that was supposed to look like a body. I saw a comment somewhere where somebody said there was a body in there, and I was like, no, I don't think so. Especially if you watch the next episode, they don't mention it. So I think it was just like an effigy. I think it was supposed to be the murdered native lady that Navarro is whose case Navarro's trying to solve. That whole area seemed like to be like a shrine to her, or some kind of yeah, like a crazy person room dedicated to her. And it kind of ends with them finding a trailer, and then the ice in the hockey rink finally thaws enough that some of the scientists like start to see what's going on with them. They assume, I guess, that the other scientist is like in there somewhere in this icicle that they pulled up out of the ice. And then we find out that one of the scientists, I think Clark, I think believe his name, is missing. He's the one that was who owned the trailer. He's the one that was involved with the girl that we're gonna find out, I think, next episode. And that's pretty much how episode 2 ended. You know, I can't say a whole lot about it other than I thought the crime lab logo was a neat little Easter egg. Seeing their not seeing their breath was a little weird. There's only going to be, I believe it's 6 episodes this season, and already, especially in the third episode, I kind of feel like it's being stretched out. They need time. They got 6 episodes to fill, so it's just going on, and I feel like they're kind of dragging things out a little bit. I almost feel like this would have been better off as maybe a movie, or maybe a two-part, like 2-hour series or something. I think I forgot to mention I was right. My prediction came true. They get the DNA results back in episode 2, confirming that the tongue they found at the station was indeed the murdered native lady. And I have to say, that's probably so far, that's the most unrealistic thing about the show. I'm okay with the ghosts and stuff walking around, and the hallucinations and all that, but the DNA results back in just a few hours is unacceptable. that's that's ridiculous. If you listen to the last episode, I talked about how usually by the time you would get DNA results back from the lab, you've forgotten what case it was. Like you get a lab result thing back, and you're like, DNA, who is this? What case is it? Is this my case? That's always where I would go. Like, is this mine? I don't think this is mine. And I would look it up. Sure enough, it would be mine. And it would be from like a year ago, and I'd forgotten all about it. So episode 3 opens up with Navarro. She's looking for the native lady that was murdered. She knew her before she was murdered. She's trying to arrest her on a warrant for trespassing on mine property, and she shows up at this place where she's at, and it turns out it's some kind of like birthing center, like a midwife office. And there's a lady in a pool giving birth, and Navarro ends up like assisting with the birth. And then at the end, I think at one point she says, you're gonna have to shoot me, but I'm gonna get this baby out of this woman. And then when the baby comes, then she like holds her hands up, and she's like, okay, I'll go with you now. And I turned to look at my wife, and I was like, at that point, I'd just be like, you know what, I'll come back tomorrow. Like, you finish up with what you're doing here. Obviously, you got stuff going on. This is a misdemeanor trespass warrant at best. We'll pick this up later. And came back later. I would not have drug her out of there at that point. I'd have been like, maybe you might still have some stuff you need to do here with the mother and the baby, and I'll just I'm not going to deny them care. I'm just gonna we'll make a rain check, and I'll come back tomorrow. How's 2:00 work for you? And don't run from me, because I'll find you. It's a misdemeanor warrant. You can get the bail between now and then, unless we're talking about post SB 91, and then there isn't even any bail, and she probably wouldn't even be going to jail. She would just be getting a summons. So they're holding a search party for the missing scientist out on the ice, I guess. I'm not really sure what the impetus is on this. I mean, if he's out there, he's probably dead. There seems to be some. Uh, Navarro seems to think he's still alive and he's still out there. I don't know. He might be, because there was definitely, when the delivery man, discovered that everyone was missing, it seemed like there was someone in the station when he got there. Maybe it was the missing scientist. I don't know. It was a little weird because they have all these guys show up. Apparently, Hank Pryor, the elder Pryor, asked these guys to come and assist with the search, basically saying like, we need all the help we can get. And like all these, like, it's like stereotypical, like they went to central casting and was like, send me your reddest of rednecks. And, there's guys in pickup trucks and they're like, they're playing the Dixie theme, like the General Lee theme when they show up, and they're like throwing beer cans out the car and stuff. I mean, just like typical, like, call central casting and say, give me some rednecks. And I'm not saying there's not rednecks in Alaska, but I'm just saying they're not like Southern rednecks. It was a little weird. It was very stereotypical, I guess is what I would say. Very, very, very like, get me a bunch of stupid rednecks and we'll have them assist with this search. And of course, Navarro, she's not about that. They go off and look, and it's a little weird how it seems like they're doing something which is connected to the case, but then one of the most unrealistic things about this is how the two, Danvers and Navarro, will be doing something, like they'll be working on something, and dispatch isn't calling them every like 20 minutes, like, we have, there's a fight at the bar, or there's two neighbors fighting over, the dog going to the bathroom in his yard, or can you call the citizen regarding a question about traffic laws? Or, I mean, because that's how it is, because you'll be like right in the middle, like you'll be working on a freaking sexual assault or a murder or something, and you're like in the room, you've got the books open, you're drawing diagrams or something, you're trying to put together a timeline. You're like, okay, at 10 o'clock the call came in. The neighbor said they heard a car door slam at 9:50. You're trying to like do all this stuff, and then dispatch like, can you call citizen back regarding a question about the legality of BB guns in the city limit? And it's just, oh my God, like, I'm freaking busy. Can you let me work on this? And you're the only one on. And on the one hand, I'm like, well, these people, this is the taxpayers, they deserve service. But on the other hand, I'm like, I'm freaking doing something kind of important here. Can I please get a minute or two? And it's kind of funny because there's this, like, whenever the plot allows for it, they get all the time in the world to do what they need to do. They hardly ever get interrupted, unless the plot needs them to get uninterrupted, which happens later this episode. So while the search party is out searching the ice, and that's another thing that, my wife commented on this episode. She said, because it's dark all the time is really weird in this episode. Like, I don't know how much time has went by since the bodies have been found. I don't know if this episode picks up the next day, a couple of days. It doesn't. It's kind of hard to track because you're not sure what time it is, because it's always dark. We at 1 minute, Navarro and Danvers will be like at home in civvy clothes, like cooking dinner or getting back from the grocery store or something, and then the next minute they're in uniform and they're doing something. So I'm like, well, how is this the next day? Is this 10 minutes from the last scene? Like, what's going on? So that's a little confusing. They have a few times thrown the date up on the screen, but honestly, I wasn't really paying attention to that. So I'm like, I'm not sure. I'm like, okay, is this the next day now? I think it's the next day. Or is it 2 days since the bodies have been found? I feel like they should do a first 48 thing, and like they should have like started a timer when the bodies were found, and then we should instead of giving us the date, they should say how many like hours have passed or days have passed, because it's a little confusing. And at one point, younger Pryor goes home and wakes his wife up as he's coming in, and he gets a call and he looks at his phone, and it's like 3:30 in the morning. So that was okay. Well, it's dark. It's nighttime. Like it's like early morning, and that was really, other than the dates, those were the only real like anchors to what time it was that we got, or exposition as to what time it was. And um, they show Danvers and Pryor. They go into the evidence room, which, unless Pryor, it was a little confusing because typically only one or two people will have access to the evidence room. And Pryor unlocked the evidence room and took Danvers in there, which makes me think that he's probably the evidence custodian. But I guess it's possible to have more than one. But so all that crap that was in the trailer, they seized it, they boxed it up, and put it in like banker boxes in the evidence room. And I told my wife, I was like, that's bullshit. um, Typically, I think in a situation like that, probably they would either seize the entire trailer and move it to a secure lot or impound, or you would just go through the trailer and seize what you considered evidence. Um, you just wouldn't grab every single little thing out of there. I mean, it's just, most places wouldn't have the room to handle that kind of evidence load. And then you have to log everything in. You have to package it, you have to label it, what it is, who packaged it, how. I mean, it's just hours and hours and hours. If you saw that trailer, how chocked full it was of crap. I mean, that would take days and days and days and days to process. To process it properly anyway. And I was telling my wife too, so you take everything out of there, box it up. Well, what if it was in a certain position? Like what if it was like, what if some of those pictures were making a collage of something else or something, like, or there was something special about the chronology of how they were um, hung up or something like that. And which, granted, you're supposed to take pictures before you collect anything, so hopefully they would get good pictures of this place uh, entirely. But to have the investigating officer Danvers and Navarro come in after the fact, after everything's been collected, and then go through it, it didn't make any sense to me. It was um, very television, I guess, very outside the norm, uh, unrealistic. And so while Pryor's showing her all this evidence, he asked her basically like, "What happened between you guys? Why aren't you guys like friendly anymore?" And she talks about how like their last case together, it was a murder suicide, where there's a flashback while she's telling the story, and they show this house. They show Navarro and Danvers, excuse me, approaching the house. And I told my wife, I assume this is probably a house they filmed in Greenland or something where they were filming the show. I told my wife, I said, that looks just like a house that would be on St. Paul Island. Like it looks exactly like a St. Paul Island house. And even on the interior, it looked like one. But basically, there's a guy who's a bad dude, uh, been in and out of jail a lot, history of, I guess, domestic violence. He was hooked up with a younger lady, and they got a call that he was beating her up or something. Anyway, they show up, and she says it was a murder suicide, and he killed her and then killed himself. But during the flashback, we clearly see that when they showed up, the girl was dead and the guy was still alive, and he turns around and he's sitting in a chair, and he turns around and looks at him as they enter, which makes me believe, I'm pretty sure this is where it's going. I'm sure it'll be revealed as we progress, that one of them, Danvers or Navarro, my money's on Navarro, but one of them kills him and they cover it up. But I mean, maybe he'll pull out a gun and kill himself. But why would she say that he was dead when they got there? If they saw him kill himself, it doesn't make any sense. So I'm kind of curious as to how that's going to go. I don't really see Navarro being someone that would cover for Danvers. Like if Danvers kills the guy, I don't see Navarro being like, oh yeah, he tripped and fell on some bullets or something. So it's a little weird. And I get tired of basically the dirty cop trope. Like all the cop, like there's really like very few bad cops out there, but every TV show has got to have, the cops doing something wrong or bad. And don't get me wrong, sometimes the means justify the ends, but when it's something like that, it's like that's beyond the pale. You don't do that. Like lying to a suspect or something. Sometimes that's fine. The Supreme Court said that's fine. But straight up murdering people, yeah, I think that's probably where you should draw the line. Probably shouldn't be doing that. So Navarro ends up coming in while she's telling the story, or somehow they get interrupted. So they start, Danvers and Navarro start going through the evidence, and they do the typical, and this is just, they do it for the show because it looks cool, I guess. They take everything out of the boxes and they put it on the floor. And I told my wife, I'm like, this is how crimes get solved, is you just take all the evidence, you just put it on the floor and you look at it. Because I don't know how many movies and shows I've seen where somebody's trying to solve a mystery and they just take everything out and they just put it on the floor in a big circle and they just stand over it. I don't know if that's ever worked. Maybe I should have tried it a couple of times. I don't know. I would like put things up on the wall and look at them. I can't say that I ever really like drew like lines or ran string or made connections or anything like that. I like to do like timelines. Personally, I like to write the timeline down. I would sit down and be like, okay, call came in at this time. The victim was last seen at this time. This person said they went by at this time, something like that. I like to do that. I like to write it down. I like to put it in chronological order. That seemed to help, but that's how I do things. I know everybody does things a little differently. So they find some hair dye on one of the pictures, and they realize that Clark, the scientist, and what was her? I keep saying that native lady. I'm gonna have to remember her name eventually. I think it's Cora. They see pictures of them together that someone else took that weren't like selfies or like time framed pictures, or stage pictures rather. And so they think maybe because it was the same color as her hair dye, she had like blue color hair. So they go talk to the hairdresser in town, and I thought this scene was a little. It, in some ways, it was very spot on because the ladies at work, and they're like, "We need to talk to you." They go in the back room. The hairdresser's like little girl comes in and is like interrupting the interview, and Danvers has to take her in the other room and like entertain her and tell her stories and make mac and cheese. And that kind of hit home a little bit because I've definitely been in situations like that where I'm trying to talk to somebody and they have like a young child, or just for whatever reason you can't get them away from where they're at, and you have to talk to them there, and people are trying to interrupt, or the children are busy, or the dogs like running around, and sometimes it helps if you got somebody else there to distract the kids or the animals or whatever, and so you can finish your interview. They get the name of Tagak, Mr. Tagak, and they're leaving the hairdresser. And I thought this was so he worked at the station, and I guess he left before all this went down. So they want to talk to him about the girl and the station. And this was one of the one of the parts where the radio traffic really bothered me because she gets on the radio, she calls Pryor, and she's like, "See what you find on Peter Tagak," and he's like, "Okay," and I was like, "Oh yeah, don't spell his name," because a lot of times when you get somebody's name over the radio, especially a difficult name like that, you always want to spell it, and usually spell it phonetically. And granted, I know they don't want to be boring for. And if she started like, Tango, Alpha, Golf, Alpha, you know, whatever, the people would be like, "What the hell is she doing?" They wouldn't get it. Uh, but it was kind of funny because it's something we deal with a lot of. Or we used to deal with. There's a large Russian population nearby here where I worked, and we would get names like Fefalov or um, Karmavidov or something, and you would mess with dispatch and you'd say, this is going to be on an Arnold Karlavidov common spelling. And of course, they dispatch would have no idea how to spell it, and you'd end up having to spell it for them. But it was like a little joke we would play on them. But yeah, that kind of took me out of it. It's like, so she didn't give his name, and you always want to give like a name. Now, granted, the hairdresser might not have his full name, but if you had his full name, you give as much name as you had, and say he's about 40 years old, 50 years old, whatever. Because if not, you get back and you get like a criminal history or printout on somebody that's like 18, and the person you're looking for is like 60. So always be as descriptive as you can, spell the names, and give age ranges if you have it. Sometimes you just don't have that information. And then they're at the ice rink, and Hank gets in trouble. So the hairdresser said that she called so Devarro asked the hairdresser, like, "Why didn't you tell anybody about this, that Clark and the murdered lady had a relationship?" And she's like, "Well, I did. I called, the police department and told them." And they're like, "Well, who'd you talk to?" And she said it was Hank Pryor. So they show up at the ice rink, and Hank is there talking to his son. And there's this like dramatic like exchange between Dan. Well, first Navarro straight up, like, I thought she was gonna like start beating him. And Danvers pulls her away, and they get into this like pissing match where he's basically calling her a whore and she's calling him lazy or whatever. And it was funny because when it was all over, and she tells him like, "Get back and like do your freaking job and go finish your search," or whatever that I guess they're still conducting. I was kind of conflicted about it when it was over, because I was like, that seemed a bit over the top. But at the same time, like, I don't know how many times I've said it, but like working in a police department is like fucking high school with guns. I mean, it's so fucking, there's so much drama sometimes. Not all the times, but sometimes. And you would think, like, with a bunch of like alpha type people, male and female, who are trained to like handle extreme situations and stuff like that, you would think that'd be okay. These guys can handle their shit. And then two guys get in a fight, like a physical fight, because one of them took the other one's pin or fucking set at his spot in briefing or something like that. And it happens, man. Like, people like get mad at each other and pissy at each other for reasons. And I think sometimes a lot of that is just the stress of the job spilling over probably where it shouldn't. And you don't have, you don't want to take that stuff out on, your family or your wife and kids, although sometimes that ends up happening. So you end up like getting pissy with your coworkers and stuff like that. But I felt it was a little over the top, but at the same time, I was like, well, no, that shit does happen. Like, there's a lot of fucking drama in police departments. But They go. Well, I can't remember. So a vet. So Pryor, Peter Pryor, the younger Pryor, calls a veterinarian cousin that he has because they can't get their forensic people in because of the weather. So the veterinarian shows up to look at the bodies, and he basically says like, "Well, I, I've seen a lot of frozen animals, like animals that have froze to death." And he says, "I don't think these men froze to death. I think they died before they froze." And he says he thinks that they were, like extremely frightened. Like look at he says when people freeze or when animals freeze to death, it's like they go to sleep and they close their eyes, and then these men were all like they were like making faces and like looked like they were screaming and they contorted. And he says it looks like they were scared to death and died before they froze. And I understand what he's saying. It kind of makes sense, but at the same time, I'm like, man, that's not that's not a golden, that's not a hard rule because I saw a lot of dead bodies in my time, like a lot. And humans, if you remember the first Lost Boys, when the Frog Brothers are like giving their briefing about vampires, and he goes, they die. You never know how they're going to go. Some of them might close their eyes and go peacefully, and some of them will fight. Some of them will explode, and some of them will implode. Um, it's pretty much the same. Like it's the same with humans. Like you don't know how a human's going to die. It depends on their condition at the time. Uh, if they know they're going to die, like what's going on with them, like there's a lot of factors to include. You might find somebody that died of exposure that very much, looks like they laid down and went to sleep. You might find somebody that died of exposure that, has a look of fear on their face. I remember there was a gentleman that died of exposure. His snow machine, I can't remember if it broke down or ran out of gas, and they went looking for him, and they found him, and he was uh, just laying. It's not funny. He's laying on the ground with his arms out, like almost in a crucifixion pose. His mouth was wide open, and he was just like looking up. And uh, I wouldn't say that he was scared to death. I wouldn't say that he died of fright. I mean, he died of exposure, but I think the question is whether he knew he was going to die or not, or if he is just like, I'll just lay here for a minute and take a nap. Um, but yeah, you never know. Like you never know how people are going to die, and I don't think you can really just like look at somebody and be like, oh yeah, he died of fright. I was like, well, maybe he died of a heart attack and he was scared while he was dying. Maybe he wasn't scared until he started to die. He didn't get scared and then die. But Navarro and Danvers, they somehow, the Navarro gets some information from her friend, I guess, her like really good friend, that Mr. Tagak lives in a nomadic community somewhere like outside of town. And I knew a few guys that worked for the North Slope Police Department, and I don't, there's definitely a lot of like little villages and stuff that pepper the landscape up there, but I don't know that there's any like nomads living up there. I guess somebody that lives up there would have to fill me in on that because I don't know. I was thinking more like, well, maybe it's like a hunting camp or something, but I don't know. Apparently, it's like some people living off the grid or something. And they go up there looking for Mr. Tagak. They find him. He is very not happy, and he's not very nice, very inhospitable. He basically runs them out of the building or his house with a gun. Although he does express true surprise that they tell him that his the scientist guys are dead, and he kind of had this moment of like, oh no, like what do you mean? And then he gets angry again and kind of runs them out. It sounds like maybe he knows something, and that's another thing. Like I was talking about how they're just dragging this out. Um, I'm sure probably by the time it's over with, like they've talked to somebody like Mr. Tagak, like he probably knows exactly what's going on or has a good idea of exactly what's going on, but they have to drag this out. There's more episodes they got to get to, so they can't solve the mystery right now. And he runs them out of the house. um, I'm surprised they didn't shoot him. But they're leaving, and the hospital calls and says that the one scientist is awake. I don't know if I mentioned that in the last episode while they were digging him out. He like turns, he starts screaming, very like Seven esque, like very shades of Seven, and apparently they had to amputate his legs and I think one of his arms. He's only got one arm left, and they try to question him. He's gone blind, of course. Like he's basically dude's not going to make it probably. And they're trying to question him. Danvers is asking what happened, and he says something. He says kind of like the same thing that we heard in the first episode. Like she's out there, she's awake, and she's out there, and she's coming for us, or something like that. Very mysterious. Um, couldn't just say this is what's happening or this is what it is. Has to say she's up, she's out there, she's awake. Very ambiguous. Uh, and then of course somehow our rednecks from earlier are at the hospital and getting and fighting with the troopers, and there's like somebody says there's been an accident during the search. It's not really explained. Maybe they'll go back and explain it next episode. But somehow the troopers that are there and the rednecks are fighting in the lobby of the hospital. Danvers goes to assist, leaving Navarro alone with the surviving scientist. And then there's like a straight up like horror movie X-Files type thing where he has some kind of like possessive episode or something where he just like, oh, he starts talking like in a different voice and calls her by her first name, says her mom's waiting for her. Mom's passed away. We learn. And then he kind of like lays back down. Pryor shows up, younger Pryor, and says that he got into the phone of the murdered lady, and they watch a video where it looks like she's in an ice cave, and she's like being very, again, nobody like explains what's going on. She's just like, she says her name and she's like, I'm here and I found something. And then of course she starts screaming, and the phone, I guess she drops the phone and you can't really see what's going on. Very mysterious, dragging the mystery out even further. And the episode ends. And I'm still invested. I still want to see what happens and where it goes. I'm a little disappointed that we haven't found out any more than we have. I mean, so far all we found out is the murder lady had a relationship with one of the scientists, and that's about it. He seemed to be oddly obsessed with her. He's had some possible mental issues or something. They mentioned, and it makes it sound like he's crazy. He's missing still, of course, probably in these ice caves or wherever the fuck her video was taken. But yeah, it's interesting. It's keeping me engaged. I wish the story probably maybe should have been maybe 3 episodes instead of 6. Kind of feel like they're dragging it out for effect. The Easter eggs, the prop department did a really good job. I feel the writing. I feel like again, like when they're doing the search party, they're calling like people agents. Like again, I don't know. There's some details I think, like the prop department I feel was like super detail oriented, and then like the writing was like, we'll call it's good, it's okay, like it's good enough. Nobody's gonna know except for people that live in Alaska, and there's only a couple hundred of them, right? I mean, their HBO has to be brought in by dog sleds, so they'll never see this. But we'll see. I think the two main characters, to me, they're pretty unlikable. Navarro is very like aggressive and overbearing. Danvers is just kind of not a nice person. Uh, her and I haven't really touched on like her daughter, a stepdaughter. We find out in this episode is of Native heritage, and she wants to kind of explore her Native heritage. And Danvers is just like no, like and not being like nice no about it either, like being a bitch about it. Like she has some tribal marks put on her face, not permanent, just like ink. And Danvers like loses her shit over it. And neither one of the protagonists are particularly likable people. Uh, but if I remember, like the first season, Woody Harrelson and Matthew McConaughey, they were flawed, but they weren't. I mean, they definitely had qualities about them, like, oh, that dude's, that's not cool. But they were endearing. They were flawed but endearing. And these antagonists or protagonists, I don't feel that way about. I feel like they're both kind of. I feel they're flawed and annoying. Um, I don't know. I'm sure somebody will be like, "Well, you're just sexist." So maybe I am. I don't know, but I think it's more to do with the writing than anything. Um, I've seen people criticizing, "Oh, it's woke bullcrap because there's like female leads." I'm like, what is it? There's a female took my position when I retired. What does it matter? Doesn't matter. Writing story matters. Writing matters. If it's good or not, it's good. If it's not, it's not. And right now, it's really hard for me to care about these characters because they're not. It seems like they're not good people. And but I'm sensitive about that stuff because I worked for law enforcement so many years. I'm sensitive about how law enforcement are portrayed, especially on screen. Um, but compared to corrections officers, law enforcement are the freaking salt of the earth. Find some movie set in like a prison or a jail where the correction staff are like all good, and there's not a crooked one or a sadistic one or something like that. So as bad as cops have it, corrections officers have it even worse. But anyway, that was my thoughts and critiques on episode 2 and 3. Not sure when I'm going to get back with another one. I'm not going to be able to probably record another one of these until the series is completely wrapped up. So probably the next one's going to cover the last 3 episodes. We'll see. I'm going to be out of town for a while and won't have access to my stuff, my recording equipment to do another episode. I am going to release some videos I've had saved up for a while onto the YouTube page. So you'll be able to check those out. But as far as the podcast goes, this is probably it for a while, the audio podcast especially. But if you're on YouTube, there should be some videos out for you here in the next couple of weeks that you can enjoy. Head over to the Alasquatch YouTube page and please subscribe. I'm like this close to getting monetized on YouTube. And it seems like they just keep moving the bar a little bit further every time. Like I'm like, oh man, I'm almost there. And then they're like, well, now you got to have this much. So, son of a bitch. What else is going on? It seemed like there was something else I wanted to talk about before I got out of here. Going to be out of the office for a while. Man. Oh, check out the new Small Town Monsters documentary, Bigfoot on the Trail. It's going to be all about the Kenai Peninsula. It's Kenai Peninsula Encounters. There's some really cool interviews with Chook from Chook's Outdoors, Les Stroud from Survivor Man, and myself. And I believe Rob Roy might be in there a little bit too. So that's going to be available on the Small Town Monsters YouTube channel here. I believe in a week or so. I'm not exactly sure on the release date. There is a trailer out that I have shared to my social medias that you can check out. You can follow me on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. Where else? Twitter, X, whatever it is now. I have a website, alasquatchpodcast.com. If you like what you hear and you want to support it, you can go to the alasquatchpodcast.com website, pick yourself up a book or a t-shirt, something like that, and I will get it out to you when I get back from my trip. In fact, that's something I need to look into. I think I might need to put a pause on that so that any outgoing orders don't get dinged. And that's it. Also, I have recently reached the status on Instagram, I guess, of monetization. If you like my stuff there, I guess you can send me stars, which translate into money. I'm not quite sure how of all the social media platforms, Instagram is probably the one I understand the least. And it's the only one that I seem to be monetized on. So um, if you go to my Instagram and somehow there's a way to give me stars or gifts or something, and that will also help support me. And that's relatively recent. That just happened here in the last few days. I've got some funny memes on there. I'm one of the first, I guess, Bigfoot memers or meme lords. Uh, Memes are like funny little pictures and videos that make light of the Bigfooting community and situation. I don't know. It's not too serious. I try not to take it too serious, and I think you should always have a good sense of humor and be able to laugh at yourself. So head over there, check those out. If you like them, throw me a few shekels. And that's it, guys. I'm clocked out. I'm going on vacation. I hope you guys enjoy my videos that are coming out. I hope you enjoyed this recounting of True Detective. And we'll see where it goes. We'll see who the killer is. I have a couple theories, but I'm not quite ready to say what it is. Well, I guess we'll find out because by the time I get back, it'll be over. So I guess we'll find out then. And no matter what happens, I'll just tell you guys I was right. I called it. No, I'll be honest. If I didn't get it right, I'll tell you. So anyway, until the next time, I will see you later. And don't forget, up here in Alaska, the beans abides.